Welcome back to another episode of Projecting Grandeur. I am your host, Ron Dichter. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for being part of our community. Today I want to talk to those of you that maybe have a business or you have an opportunity to leave the company that you're currently at. And really the concept today is about knowing when it's your time, when you should sell, when you should leave, when you should change. And I have a lot of experience in this topic. So while I may not be an expert, I've got personal firsthand experience in having, fairly high-powered positions in companies and leaving, as well as businesses and selling. And I've done this quite a few times in my career. So when do you know that it is time for you to say sayonara and pack your bags and move on? Whether, again, it's changing careers, whether it's, selling a business, whether it's just simply moving on to something different. Like, when do you know it's time? And the simple answer to this, at least what I have found, and again, I'm going to tell you what my personal view, my personal experience is in this regard, but when I don't have passion and I simply don't want to go to whatever it is I'm going to, whether it's my job, whether it's my business, if I do not have that passion and spark to hop out of bed and go after, the growth of the business, go after, the career progression, climbing the ladder, whatever you say, like, that's the first sign to me that maybe it's time. And I think everything has a shelf life. I think people have a shelf life. I think businesses have a shelf life. And while a business may continue and thrive well after a single person is in charge of it, I do think that a person at the helm of a business has an expiration date. And there's a concept, I can't remember who taught it, but it talks about usable hours you have in your life. And the point to this person's speech or book, whatever it was about knowing when it's time to retire. And every person on earth, at least in this person's viewpoint, has a amount of useful hours where they can be additive to society from a forward progress standpoint, whether that's business, whether that's career, whether that's your brain, whatever it is. And then when you don't have those usable hours anymore, that's when you know it's time to pack it in. Well, that same concept really applies, in my view, to business and to your career and to your role, that there's a point in time where you're just not useful in that role, either to yourself or to the business that you own or the business that you work in. And so when you lose that passion, when you don't have any real burning desire to do the thing that you're doing, that's your first sign that it's time to start thinking and evaluating where you're at in your life and whether or not it's time for a reinvention of yourself, a new chapter, or to pack it in and go play golf. But that's only the first sign. The second is when you get into that environment and you're in the let's call it the exciting part of your job or your business, does that reignite that spark? Because getting out of bed and going to the office, or getting into your routine, whatever it is, that energy to do it, that excitement to do it, that's one thing. But that's because that there's good and bad waiting for you in that day. But let's take only the good. Let's say that you are in that moment of good in your job, in that moment of good in your business. Does that moment of good spark or reignite your desire and interest to be in the role that you're in? Because if it is, well, then maybe leaving isn't the right move, right move at that moment. Maybe it's actually bringing in some supporting cast to be able to help deal with some of the stuff that's bringing you down. But let's just say you get into the business or the job and you don't even feel the spark or the reignite of the passion when the good is happening. Well, that's your second sign that it might be your time to go. And then the last thing that I look at, and obviously this one may override the first two depending on where you're at in life, but is if I left, would I be okay? Do I have a family? Do I have, a spouse, a kids, plural? Do I have school? Like all these expenses and things that you've got going on in your life, like do you, if you were to leave today, would you be okay? And if the answer to that is no, well, then you probably, as much as you may want to go, you may not be able to go because you didn't do proper planning to get yourself in a position to allow yourself to leave. And so, but let's just say the alternate is factual. Let's just say you get to the place and you also have the financial solvency or the fiscal discipline in cutting your expenses that you can actually survive in the event that you don't have any income coming in. So if you don't have passion to get up to go do the thing that you do, if in the best moments of the thing that you do, it doesn't reignite your passion, and you have the financial solvency to be able to leave and be okay, if those three things are a yes, that in my view is the indicator that it's time to go, or it's time to sell, or it's time to move on. And so if you get to that point, you have to be thoughtful and really, pragmatic about how you approach either leaving or selling, because obviously you want to maximize the value when you do leave. And so if you do get to that point, that doesn't mean you just have an abrupt departure. That means that's your indication that it's time to start the process of leaving. And that can take time. My last business, it took me 14 months to completely unravel myself out of. When I, even when I said this is when I want to leave, it still took me 14 months. So there is proper planning, that goes into it in order to, leave, maximize your exit, and obviously if the company is going to continue on, if you own a company, then making sure that the successor that follows you or that you sell it to is in good hands and your team is left in good hands to continue to grow and prosper. But if any of those three things are no, well, that means you just probably need to make some changes. Meaning if you don't have the passion when you get up in the morning, but you do feel the passion when you're there and you're in the good moments, then maybe what you need to do is change up your routine. Maybe you're working out at the end of the day, you need to flip it around and work out at the beginning. Maybe you're having late night drinks every night, going out to dinners. Maybe you need to change that and go to bed early. There's some lifestyle change that you need to make in order to feel that energy and that excitement. Let's say when you do get in that you are excited when the good is happening, but you get really down when the bad, well, maybe you need to bring in some help. Whether that means hiring some people, whether that means, trusting and delegating some of the work that you've got to someone else. But if the passion and spark is there when the good is happening, do more of the good. Find people to help do some of the stuff you don't like to do. And if the last one is not true, meaning you don't have the financial solvency to leave, but you don't have the passion, and even when it's good, you're not really excited about it, well, that means it's time to start planning now. And that might take you months, that might even take you years, but it requires you to really start planning and thinking through, when you're going to be leaving, what position you financially need to be in to leave, and making sure that you make all the right decisions today to allow that to happen. So anyway, as I said, I've left careers, I've left businesses, and I always try to leave them in a better place than when I was there, and that takes proper planning, but being honest with yourself about what your passions are, and if you can have that passion in that business is the first step. So I hope you find this helpful. Frankly, I hope you're in a position where you love what you do, you're passionate about it, and you have the financial solvency, but those don't all happen. So make sure you use this wisely to make good life decisions. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Ron Dichter, and this is Projecting Grandeur.